Hello everyone, my name is Roya, and I have read 6 books in the first half of May. Or June. It is June. Okay, I wasn't sure there for a second. I'm sorry if I'm uploading like super often right now at the moment because like I have just way too many videos that I kind of need to post this month because they won't be relevant anymore afterwards. So like for example, I only just posted my diversity bingo check-in and that's already outdated because I've already completed more of the challenges. So the first book that I finished in the month of June, I almost said May again, is Mostly Human by D.I. Jolly. This was sent to me for review by the author, and this is about a boy named Alex who gets bitten by a werewolf and then goes on to become a famous rock star while still being a werewolf. I really enjoyed the discussions and themes of this book. Like, it made some really interesting points about music. It had a really great family dynamic because Alex's whole family knows that he's a werewolf and they're like helping him and all this other stuff, like his parents and everyone know. The like relationship he has with his sister is just amazing, and they have so much like character banter back and forth, and that just really entertained me. But there were a lot of things that I didn't like about this book as well. For instance, just the way that it spent almost half the book just talking about Alex getting bitten by a werewolf and being rushed to the hospital and when he's 10 years old, and I was kind of hoping that more of the book would be about him as an adult, but like less than 100 pages were about him as an adult, like total out of this whole 400-page book. Check out my review for more of my thoughts if you have not seen that yet, and also this book is in fact the first in a series. I had said in that review that I think it was a standalone, but it's not. It is actually the first in a series, so there you go. The other book that was sent to me for review this month is An American Decade by Richard Aronowitz, and this was sent to me by Accent Press. This is a historical fiction that follows a guy named Christoph who goes from Germany, moves to New York, and begins a career as a Broadway singer in 1929. From his like safe place in the United States, he sees like Hitler's rise to power and the stuff that goes on before that and all this other stuff that's going on in Germany, and kind of goes, well, Germany is gonna be a really different place if I go back. And also I absolutely loved this book. It's so thought-provoking and just insane, and I loved that it really calls into question kind of what people, like why people do the easy thing instead of the right thing. But anyway, you can go and check out my review for this because that will be the very next video that I post. The next book that I finished was an audiobook, and that is The Ovilus Gauge by N.K. Jemisin. This is the sequel to the 5th season, which I read a few months ago, and I think I'm not really sure which one I like better because they're so different from each other. And I listened to this one on audiobook, whereas I read the physical book of the first one, so I'm really not sure. The weird second-person point of view took up more of this one than it did of the previous one, and it still kind of annoyed me. Like, I just really don't get why it's second person. I mean, I'm sure there's a very good reason for it because these books are absolute genius, but I still just couldn't help but feel like it was weird. I am very excited for the third one to come out because it comes out this summer. The other audiobook that I listened to so far this month is Ramona Blue by Julie Murphy, and this is basically about a girl who has always identified as a lesbian, and then one day her childhood friend Freddie comes back into her life after a long absence, and she actually develops feelings for him even though he's a boy. And I was very interested in this book because it was kind of my situation. I had only liked girls for years and years and years. Then, you know, I met my husband. So I really enjoyed that aspect of the story about Ramona having to basically come out all over again, being like, so yeah, I actually like a boy? What's going on here? But the book is about so much more than that, and it's awesome. So basically Ramona lives in a trailer with her pregnant sister and her dad, and basically her pregnant sister has a boyfriend who is the baby's father, who is kind of a jerk, and Ramona is trying to be like helpful and hoping that she and her sister can have an awesome like life and not have to necessarily like, you know, she wants to make things better for her sister and for the baby. They survived Hurricane Katrina, and that was when their mom left. And she lives in this really small town where she works 2 part-time jobs and kind of like never really thought of college or anything like that as an option. She, like, there's a really good quote in here about what I would do for a living was never a consideration, just when I could start, or how soon I could start. So anyway, I really, really enjoyed Ramona Blue, but I think the one criticism that I might have of it is just the fact that the guy that she ends up in love with is kind of underdeveloped. Like, he didn't really seem to be anything other than, like, generic, and he didn't seem to have that much of an interesting personality or any of that, but all the same, like, I really, really enjoyed this book so much, and I highly recommend it. Next, I read Lady of the Forest by Jennifer Robertson, and this is a Robin Hood retelling with pretty much Maid Marian as the central character, and I am such a sucker for Robin Hood retellings. It's probably one of my favorite things to read retellings of, and I really, really enjoyed this. I did, however, think that Robin Hood was a little bit one-dimensional compared to Maid Marian and even the Sheriff of Nottingham, because, I don't know, I mean, I know he's not supposed to be the central character in this, Marian is supposed to be the central character, but I still wish we had actually gotten to see more of Robin Hood in this, and I feel like way too many dudes in this were obsessed with Marian, because I did kind of I mean, obviously a huge plot point is just how misogynistic and stupid all the guys in this story are, but we have, like, I mean, Prince John, as soon as he sees her, he's like, oh, I have to sleep with her, and, like, won't take no for an answer, and she's like, ew, go away, talk to the hand. And basically, like, the Sheriff of Nottingham, his entire motivation is that he wants to marry her, even though he was, like, her father's friend and is way freaking older than her, so I don't know. And obviously, like, a huge part of the plot is just the fact that he's a douchebag. He's really mean to his daughter just because she has sex all over the place. He won't take Marian's no for an answer either, because he kind of just goes, oh, well, you're just a woman, you don't, like, know, know how to make decisions for yourself. And it's like, so a large part of this is just how, you know, Marian kind of has to be like, go away to all these guys and everything, because they're all gross and they're horrible people. But I did think that, you know, that kind of horrible misogyny and everything is so relevant to today. And I mean, the villains, like especially Prince John and the Sheriff, really reminded me of, like, Donald Trump and his supporters, for example. And I feel like villains, you know, should be relevant because that's what makes the book good. But, like, to a certain extent, I mean, so basically I grew up reading historical fiction. Like, we didn't have young adult books back when I was a young adult, so I grew up on Philippa Gregory and Alison Ware and other historical fiction authors, basically, so I am very, very desensitized to a certain amount of misogynistic comments from, like, gross old guys in fantasy books, but so when I tell you that there might actually be a bit too much and it could have been toned down a bit, I mean it. I'm not just saying, oh no, there's too much misogyny in this because one dude called a lady a whore, but that's not it at all. It's actually, like, there is a lot of, like, victim blaming in cases of rape and assuming that a girl got raped just because she was, like, kidnapped and all this other stuff that I really think it could have been toned down a little bit, and that means that there was kind of a lot, because my tolerance for that is very, very high in a historical fiction / retelling type thing, whatever the hell this is. So basically just know that going into it. But anyway, back to, like, the fact that all these dudes are obsessed with Maid Marian. So we also have Guy of Gisborne, whose entire purpose in this book is just to be obsessed with Marian, and he really added nothing to the story apart from that. But also one weird thing is that when I first picked up this book, the Goodreads reviews for it were saying, like, any negative reviews it got were like, there's too much sex, there's too much sex, there's too much sex. But guess how much sex this has in it? None. There is no sex in this book, so I don't know why all these people on Goodreads are like, oh no, there's too much sex. So then I went into this going, too much sex? You mean enough sex, because that's what I want to read about. I want to read about people falling in love and sleeping together, but that did not really happen because it was all really glossed over. But all the same, I absolutely adored this book. It was such a fun read, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. And sixth, but definitely not least, but most recent, is The Privilege of the Sword by Ellen Kushner. And this is an Own Voices book with a bisexual main character, and I absolutely love seeing that in a fantasy book, and I had a lot of fun reading this. The first half was actually really boring, and that's why I only gave it like 3.5 out of 5 stars. But I really, really loved the second half, and basically this girl, this whole thing is about this girl who goes to live with her uncle, who wants to teach her how to sword fight and do all this stuff instead of just being a proper like lady and whatnot. And the thing that I loved most about this book is that everyone in it is bisexual. Yes, you heard me. Like, everyone of any significance in this book is bi, and that made me so happy. And also the romance that doesn't quite happen, really, between two girls in this book is just one of the best female-female romances I've ever read about. Even though they don't actually end up hooking up, I just loved it so much, and I thought that was awesome. But unfortunately, the world building was practically not even there, and practically nothing happened in the whole first half of the book. And the story could have been developed a lot more. But also, trigger warnings for rape, just letting you know. Also, I mean, a girl gets raped and then by a person she's supposed to marry and then decides not to marry him because of course he raped her. Obviously she doesn't want to marry him anymore, but then there's all this stuff about her parents going, why? Why wouldn't she want to marry him now? I don't get it, even though he raped her. And so if that would be triggering to you, just you might want to avoid this book. But if that is not a trigger for you, that it made for a really incredible conflict that I just loved reading about. These books plus 2 audiobooks is everything that I read in the first half of June. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you very soon with a new video. Bye!